Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 66th Annual General Meeting of the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. Once again, we're holding this AGM as an online event because we're able to do so under the Trust Constitution. This is allowing us to minimise any health risks to participants and attendees, but we also find that an online event can in fact provide more flexibility, allowing more people to attend. I hope by next year we might be in a position where we're going to be able to meet face to face, but the online component of the meeting could still be a helpful option. Meanwhile, we're going to proceed this evening with our online meetings, and I'm delighted to see so many people who've come along to take part. I'd first of all like to introduce the members of the panel for this event. They'll be carrying out either official duties or taking part in presentations. First of all, we have the honorary officers. I'm Anne Tomlinson, I'm the Chair of Trustees. Our Vice Chair is Bob Byrne, our Honorary Treasurer, Andy Thorpe, and our Honorary Secretary, Peter Williams. We also have a couple of staff members on the panel tonight. Matt Carter took up the role of Chief Executive Officer on 30th of August this year. We're delighted that Matt's joined us, and he's already making huge steps towards realigning trust operations so that we can deliver our new strategy and do even more for wildlife in the two counties. You'll be hearing more from Matt later on. Also on the panel tonight is Josephine Taylor, our Supporter Development Manager, who I'm sure many of you will know. Jo will be in charge of the voting procedures this evening, and she'll also be keeping an eye on the Zoom apparatus behind the scenes. One of the things that she will be doing is monitoring any questions that members might have during the course of the meeting. As you will know from the formal calling notice, questions were required to be submitted by the 3rd of November. We've had a number of questions submitted, and we'll be answering those questions during tonight's presentations. However, if there are any other questions that occur to people during the evening, they will be able to enter them in the Q&A section of the Zoom website. And if we have time, we'll endeavour to answer those at the end of official business. If, however, we feel there's insufficient time to answer those questions fully, we undertake to answer them after the meeting and put the answers up on the Trust website. So before we start the official business of the meeting, I'm going to hand over to Jo now, and she's going to explain the voting procedures.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. So we've currently at 103 participants. That's households. There's probably more people than that watching. I'm just going to say something about the voting system. So there are 6 votes this evening. I'll share something on the screen, and you just simply say yes or no to vote. And I'm now going to share the agenda. Over to you, Anne.
Apologies for that. I'm a laptop girl, and using a mouse is really awkward for me. Difficult to work out which direction to move it in. So our first resolution this evening is to record that we're all in agreement that this AGM has been called properly under the Trust Articles of Association. The calling notice for this process is effectively the last page of the annual review document, which gave you details of the AGM and its agenda. So I would like to ask for the meeting's agreement that this AGM has been called in the correct way. The proposer is Matt Youngs and the seconder is Abby Wilkin. I'll now ask members to vote on this resolution. There will be 1 minute for voting.
Sorry, everyone, we're just trying to sort out the poll issue, but Pete Burgess said he will do his presentation whilst we're trying to sort this out, and then our official business will resume that afterwards. So hope you enjoy Pete's presentation.
Hi everyone, and yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. If it's any consolation, when Devon Wildlife Trust had our AGM, exactly the same thing happened with the voting system. So you're not alone, and hopefully you'll be able to resolve some of the gremlins. But yeah, beavers to the rescue. So yeah, I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes on beavers in Devon. I'll share my screen, and I shall begin. I will just probably need one member of the trust just to give me the okay that this can be seen. I'm looking towards Matt for a thumbs up. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I'm Pete Burgess. I'm Director of Nature Recovery in Devon Wildlife Trust, and we've had significant experience working with nature's own fabulous engineers, and it's a real privilege for me to be here tonight introducing what potential beavers have to restore the health of our rivers and wetlands. So what I want to do is introduce and start off with beavers, a bit about their natural history, how Devon Wildlife Trust has been involved with beaver restoration, but also the restoration of wetlands, and a lot of the science and evidence associated with why these ecosystem engineers are just so critical to our environment. And I'm going to start off with a video, and hopefully you will be able to see this, and I'll just sort of narrate over the top. But beavers are a large rodent. Yeah, they're our second largest rodent in the world, second only to the capybara. They're a semi-aquatic animal. They spend the vast majority of their time either in, near, or on water. I'll play that again. They, as you see here, are eating soft vegetation. Often people think, oh, beavers, they're chewing wood or eating bark of trees. That's true. During the summer period, though, they're there feeding on soft vegetation. They are amazingly adapted to their wetland environment. So if you look, you can see their ears, nose, eyes are all on a level plane. So they can spend a lot of their time just sensing their environment with very little of the beaver's body above water. Other sort of evolution areas, they've got a second eyelid, a sort of nictitating membrane, so they can see underwater. They've got an amazingly dense fur. 10,000 hairs per square centimetre, which gives you an idea how well insulated they are in the aquatic environment. They were hunted to extinction in our country probably about 400 years ago or so, and now they're making a comeback. And a little bit more about their natural history. So beavers are, they live in family groups. They're very social animals in their family group. So here you can see mum with two small kits. This is, well, three small kits. Here comes another. This is around probably the June time of year. An adult female may weigh something in the order of about 25 kilos. So that's the size of an average sort of family dog. So think spaniel, a big chunky spaniel, and you're about the right size in terms of weight. Each year they will give birth to perhaps 2, maybe even up to 5 kits. And in that family group, you will have these youngsters which have been weaned. You'll then have teenagers from the year before, and the monogamous mum and dad, should we say. When they have another generation, so to sort of then 4 generations, the sub-adults are kicked out. They're not welcome anymore, and off they go into the wider environment. But beavers are very territorial. They love the environment that they're in, and they look after it and defend it really strictly. So if you're a young beaver and you're moving through another territory, you're likely to get a bit of a clip round the ear, or perhaps even worse from other family or other territorial families which are downstream. What you're seeing here there is that those beavers are on top of a dam. And that's probably what we know beavers most of. When we were children, we sort of heard about Hiawatha and thinking about North American beavers and these huge dam structures. Well, this is much more akin to what we have in the British landscape. The only reason they dam is really to raise the water table. They're safest when they're in deeper water. They use water to be able to move from A to B. It's a really efficient way of moving around a landscape to exploit new habitat. But ultimately, it's about their own protection. So they like to create water about 60 centimeters deep. If this water was already like that, let's say it was a lake, they wouldn't need to dam. So the dams are purely there to create the depth of water that they need to feel secure and to exploit new habitat. And in terms of where they live during the day, they're sort of crepuscular, nocturnal animals. They don't like being out in the daylight, and they make lodges. Generally, most beaver lodges will be in riverbanks. So the entrance to the lodge will be underwater, and then they exit the water from underneath within their lodge, and that's where they spend the majority of their time. So generally within a bank lodge environment. So let me just move on. So beavers in Devon, that's our bit of a whistle-stop tour in terms of a bit of beaver and their natural history. One thing I didn't say actually is their diet. I did mention that they like soft vegetation during the summer. They tend to switch to more woody vegetation during the winter period. But they are strict herbivores. Some people think they eat fish. Even an MP asked the question about fish eating. They do not eat fish at all, strict herbivores. So here we've got a map of the Southwest Peninsula. We first got involved in our beaver work with an enclosed beaver project. This was back in 2009, really, when we started first thinking about the role that beavers may play in restoring the health of our wetland environments. And there was no better way of doing that than to work with a local farmer and landowner that we had built strong relationships with, to enclose an area of wet grassland and to see what these animals could do. You know, we knew that they had the capacity to breathe this new life into wetlands, but it was the only responsible thing at that time to be able to see that, witness it firsthand, enable people to see what the beavers were able to do, but also unlock a whole range of different research experiments that were carried out within that area. The next big project that we were involved with, which the enclosed project really laid the groundwork for, was the River Otter Beaver Trial. And these 3 slides introduce what has been a huge effort from a wide range of partners to return beavers to the English landscape. So back in the early 2010s, we had occasional and sporadic reports of beavers being seen on the River Otter. There were just the occasional gnaw marks on trees, these really characteristic field signs that you get from beavers. And we believed it was possibly just one individual, and had no idea where it might have come from, possibly an escape, possibly a release without license. But in 2014, everything changed. And we had a video, and a video was released to the media of kits in the River Otter. So for the first time in over 400 years, beavers were breeding in the wild in Devon and in England. That was exciting, but it also presented some serious challenges because this was an unsanctioned population. We didn't know where these animals came from. The government were extremely concerned from a human health perspective. These animals could have been introduced from Europe, and with that comes a couple of diseases which are of quite significant concern. What was even more is we didn't even know if they were Eurasian beavers. There's 2 different species, so they could have been North American. We had no idea. So we worked with the local communities. We started a campaign to enable those beavers to remain on that river. But the responsible thing and the essential thing that had to happen first was they all had to be captured. Well, the adult beavers had to be captured. They had to be tested to ensure that they were fit and healthy and free of a particular disease, or a tapeworm in this instance, called Echinococcus multilocularis, which I've learnt to say without getting tongue-tied. So they were given a very detailed health check, the gold standard, before they were then given a clean bill of health. I have to say, those 3 or 4 weeks, I was like an expectant parent, because if those animals that were then in captivity did or have any issue in terms of their health, they would either had to be killed or they would have had to remain in captivity. Whilst this was happening, we obviously submitted a very detailed license application. We gained the support of a whole range of different landowners and communities within the River Otter, most notably organisations and large estates like Clinton Devon Estates, which were fully behind the project, and a major landowner in that area. And then came the day when these animals were able to be returned back to the river. So that, in about a couple of minutes, was a huge amount of effort, resource, ups and downs, and excitement of working with people and wildlife. So we do have wild beaver populations now on the River Otter, and from 2020 the trial was deemed to be a success. The beavers were allowed to remain. And what was so exciting was that the government announced that they could naturally expand into other catchments. But there were some other catchments where there were beavers as well. So the Tamar has a wild population. It's probably likely to be either escape or again released without license into that area. There's also a population on the Tor, also of unknown origin. These are definitely not linked to us or the River Otter. So we have a building population of beavers in the southwest. And with that comes responsibilities from a whole range of organisations, but also a real excitement in terms of what their potential is. So why am I so excited? Why is there so much groundswell of support for these animals? I've heard it say there's only 2 animals that really manipulate and create an environment to support their own populations. One is us, the other are beavers. I'm sure there's many more, but it's quite a nice statistic to come out with. But these animals are what we refer to as keystone species, hence the picture on the right-hand side there. So historically, ecologists used to believe if you had this huge food web and you took one species out of that food web, everything else would rebalance it and everything would be okay. You would just be impoverished by that one species. We now realize that there are species like beavers that if you remove them from an ecosystem, you have a cascade effect, and lots of other wildlife is seriously impacted as a result. So beavers have so much more impact on their environment than just their biomass. And that's what is the definition of keystone species. And these next slides, I think, just show that a picture paints 1,000 words. So this is an aerial plan drawing of our enclosure and where the beavers were reintroduced. So this was in West Devon, 3-hectare enclosure. If you're on the right-hand side, to the left is about, give or take, 150 meters. When the beavers were introduced to this area of wet grassland, there was hardly even open water. There was just a trickle of a stream running right to left. What we did was dig a pond, and that's where the beavers were reintroduced. That dotted line there in the middle, that round thing, is the lodge that we created for the beavers. So these drawings were actually carried out by Southwest Archaeology. Their archaeologists are the best at drawing plan drawings. Rely on them when it comes to doing this work. They're far better than us ecologists at drawing these sorts of things. So year 1, after the beavers are there, the black lines are dams, the darker grey is area of wetland, and you can already see the beavers are starting to manipulate their environment, create far larger areas of open water. Take a look at those little thin grey lines as well. They're things we call beaver canals. More about those later. So year 2, many more dams, spreading that water out from that really indistinct channel, pushing it sideways out into the floodplain. As we go on into future years, you can see that what the beavers have done is create this massively dynamic, ever-changing environment, 13 dams, huge amounts of water stored, about 1 million litres of water, and just this is one of the best ways, I think, of describing what keystone species is able to do. This is what it looks like from the air. So if you think of the bottom of the screen is water in, top of the screen, water out, this landscape that you can see, or this aerial photo, had no visible water there before beavers arrived. And now this is what you see. So this whole raft of different dam structures that we've got across this area, you can see wherever the water is lying left to right, that is being held back behind a dam. These are organic, they're living structures. The beavers are constantly manipulating them, trying to create new ways of being able to go and spread out within that landscape, and to be able to exploit new habitat, to feel safe in that area. And you start to see the scale of influence that beavers can have on what was previously a very exciting habitat. Now it's one that is really dynamic and ever changing. So this, I'll just play to the end of that you can just see what impact these animals have been able to do in our headwater streams. Now that's great from an ecological perspective, and seeing the wildlife that's benefits, the intrinsic value of bringing a species back that has been lost from our environment. But that doesn't convince everyone. If all I could say about bringing wildlife back was, well, due to intrinsic value, some key decision makers wouldn't necessarily be always supporting us. So then we get to the science. So this is work that is really groundbreaking that the University of Exeter supported us with. Hope you can see all these slides. It sometimes depends on where you have your banner or whether you've got speaker view. But in the top there, you can see the series of 13 dams. Water comes in from the right on the blue arrow, it comes out on the left on the red arrow. This is scientific gold dust when it comes to investigating beaver impacts, because you are able to put telemetry in the top of the site and at the bottom and understand what impacts that those series of dams have. And that's shown in the lines below. So this is a hydrograph. So this shows the depth of water that is flowing in and out of the site. You might be able to see tiny little lines coming from top to bottom in that graph. They are rainfall events. So basically what this is showing you is flow in and flow out. So flow out is the red line, flow in is the blue line. Now you see at the start of the diagram, something's a bit odd. You've got more water going out of the site than in. What that's showing you is that there was little flow going in, but these dams were able to store water and slowly release them. Beaver dams aren't impermeable. Water doesn't just flow over the top, it flows through them. So this is really important when it comes to drought conditions. So when there's no flow into this environment, there's a reliable flow coming out because of all of that water stored. And if you extrapolated that over the whole of our headwaters, the impacts would be massive. So that, especially after the summer we've had, is really exciting. The thing that really captures decision makers' minds and attention is the thing on the right-hand side. So if without beavers, you have a very fast response to river change and flood change. The faster response your rivers and streams have, the more damaging those events are. So you can see when flow comes in above beavers, it's quite a sharp up and a sharp down. It's a spiky, flashy catchment. They're dangerous and they're not good from an environmental perspective. At the other end, after just 13 dams and 200 meters, that's smoothed out. So it takes the top off the flood peak, but it also gives what we call base flow enhancement. So it gives us water in drought and it takes the peaks out of the floods. So that is just from that one experiment is fantastic and very, hugely valuable conclusions. Now here is what happens in the wild. So this is a living, working landscape which has a family of beavers in it. This is right down at the bottom of the River Otter near Otterton. This is actually on one of the estate lands, so Clinton Devon Estates. You can see what the beavers have done. They've created a fantastic dam and a series of dams actually that you can't see below and upstream. The village below does suffer from flood, also suffers from drought as well. And what we've been able to show there through Environment Agency telemetry is that the same thing happens in the wild than in our enclosed scenario, which you can see on the right hand side with that very noisy chart. But basically beavers are able to, just in this circumstance, reduce the peak flows that that environment is experiencing, and that's even without them being anywhere near their maximum population level. Again, I'd say a picture paints 1,000 words. These dam structures, which are nature's filtration systems, are able to clean our water. So jug on the left, water going into beaver dams, jug on the right, that same water after it's been filtered through a series of dams. So suspended sediments are significantly reduced in a beaver environment, so are phosphates, so are nitrates. These are all things we spend a huge amount of money to remove from water so that it is drinkable. It's also very damaging ecologically. So beavers provide that range of function. But also, you know, there's the biodiversity value, of course. When you look at the enclosed beaver site, from an area that was previously without open water, it's not entirely surprising that our amphibian numbers are going to go through the roof, and they did. You know, there's a linear path straight up in terms of the number of frog spawn clumps which were found. Unfortunately, we had drought conditions on one year, and a very cold period, as you can see behind. And that led to a loss of species, but they're then back able to bounce back, being much more resilient. We've also seen populations of willow tits sustained or enhanced. We get wonderful pictures of woodcock, snipe overwintering, small red-eyed damselfly. No, sorry, small red damselfly that's there on the left. And I had to write this down because it's very difficult to remember. It's the potty spangled reed beetle there on the right-hand side, which is a species which loves bog pondweed. We didn't have very much bog pondweed on the site before beavers rise. But what do beavers do in this scenario? You know, they can't dam this. This is too high energy a river. This is a river otter. What impact are they having? So we're already introduced that they're going to be ensuring that there's more water there in drought, less peak flows eroding the side of that bank, really deeply incised. But on the right hand side there, they are in and amongst all of that, above that shingle bar, coppicing that vegetation, the sorts of things that we do as within our nature reserves. The beavers are there doing for free, so creating that really dynamic environment. We do love our kit, and so does the University of Exeter. And it provides us now with just unrivaled ways of assessing the impacts of beavers on, for example, here, standing woody vegetation. And so using UAVs, we're able to actually assess the changes in canopy height and the amount of standing woody vegetation by overflying these areas and seeing what influence beavers have. So in the picture on the left-hand side there is the areas in orange are where there's loss of canopy height. Blue is where in effect wetland areas have been able to be expanding, and then you're able to have 3D pictures in the right-hand side that we can then monitor the influence those beavers are having. These are the things, though, that as apart from loving kit, the other side is actually looking at what those biodiversity effects are. I talked about beaver canals earlier, and this is a fantastic picture of one on the left-hand side there. They dig these narrow structures through environments, and they literally use them like we do in terms of canals. They float sticks down through there so that they don't have to carry them. Sticks are heavy. Why do that when you can float them? But by creating those environments, they're benefiting other species. Now, I don't think this happened in the Midlands, but for us, water voles went extinct. They were actually reintroduced to Devon. This was one of the rivers that they were reintroduced to, the River Tail, which is part of the Otter. And the water vole populations have responded dramatically to this increase in environment. So the survey here shows yellow water vole records in 2016, the green are water vole records in 2021, and you can just start seeing the massive increase in records that are being had, but also where they're across the whole of this wetland area, whereas previously they were just confined to one channel. Now moving on to the dams and the dams themselves. Now beavers will try and dam in areas where dams are unlikely to be able to be sustained long term. And these are really dynamic features. So on the left there, this dam was probably 6 feet high when it was at its greatest. When it came to October, November storms, it was washed out. So what was a big beaver pool and it was pushing water sideways, was then washed out, and it created the environment that we've got on our right. So from what was previously quite a muddy environment, quite heavily silted, lots of these things being held up behind the beaver dams, doing their job as a filtration system, we then had all of these amazing clean gravels, which are just wonderful environments for fish, fish breeding and spawning. This is a little bit busy, should we say, as a slide, but we enlisted the help of University of Southampton to look at impacts of beavers on fish. And the second column or bar in this is what you should be looking at. So the far left, we had an upstream control where we electrofished. We were then electrofished in the second bar along above the beaver pool. Then where this old dam site was, which where the dam had washed out, and then downstream of that. And what those studies showed, although it's something that I admit we need to replicate many more times, is that the abundance of fish within the beaver pool was significantly higher than elsewhere within that river system. Not surprising, we've created some lovely deep water for the fish. Within that area as well, the fish were generally larger, so they were larger, they were more abundant, but also importantly on the downstream area, they had perfect areas for them to be spawning. So the third column, you see the dark black was brown trout. So the brown trout were favouring these areas of clean gravels, high oxygen levels, which were created through this dynamic system. So often when it comes to beaver dams, these things aren't static, they're constantly changing. They're being eroded, the beavers are building them up, they're moving sideways, some collapse, etc. Yeah, it's just always changing, and that's what's part of why it's so exciting. Now that same dam here on the left-hand side, you can see, if anyone's got good eyesight there, that sea trout, which is moving its way up through. In the summer, that structure would have been impassable to fish. And this is often one of the concerns which is raised, that we spend so much time removing these barriers to fish passage through a landscape. Now beavers are bringing putting additional barriers in the way, but in this instance, this was passable in October, November when those floods came through. If you give these areas space, you create all of the wetlands over the floodplain. That creates the conditions for all of the different life cycle stages of fish. If we just think of fish in these small, narrow, deeply incised channels, which are very unnatural, the ability to fish to live out all of those different life cycle stages is much impeded. And there's wonderful work done on looking at how fish rely on woody debris within rivers themselves for nursery areas, especially for fish. Now, if everything around ecology was just focused on the natural history of species and bringing them back, I think our work would be very simple and straightforward. But what we have effectively done with beavers is bring an ecosystem engineer back to a landscape which is highly productive and quite contested. So the large focus, or the majority of our time, has been spent in building awareness and building support and understanding about what it means to live alongside these animals again. there's a lot of misunderstanding, and it's quite natural because we haven't lived alongside these animals for 400 years. There's a lot of anxiety and worry about what beavers might do. There's often concern that they might be, well, even from eating fish right through to creating huge areas of flooded wetlands, and obviously concerned that there's little that people might be able to do about that. So the vast majority of our time has been focused on working with a whole range of different communities and stakeholders within this landscape to support them, for people to understand again what it means to live alongside the animals, and to understand what can be done to mitigate some of the impacts if they aren't tolerated in given areas, which is understandable. We've, again, with the University of Exeter, looked at social and perception work about whether, even down to people support the reintroduction of this species. In 2017, the number was, I think, hovering around the 90% mark. That actually increased during the period of the River Otter beaver trial, which is, a testament to the huge focus that was placed on providing good, objective, sound information, making sure everyone's views counted, that we were always open to have those discussions. We also introduced things like having a beaver hotline. People were able to contact us and they knew that they would get advisors out immediately to be able to resolve any issues. And often those issues were just around perception and not around reality of what impacts these animals might have. So be that agricultural shows, specific interest groups. Here at the bottom there was a wide range of fisheries and fishery management groups, right through to really complex and quite difficult discussions about beaver management. And that leads us on to what has now been embedded in law, with now that beavers are a protected species, which came into force from the 1st of October of this year. This stepwise approach to effectively living with these animals. And the vast majority of all of our time, and I'd actually say to a degree we failed if we go beyond number 3 in this hierarchy. So at every stage, you expect there to be less of your time focused on those areas. So very much around education, awareness raising, supporting landowners and others to provide space for the animals to do what they do best, considering just very simple mitigation measures so that some of the impacts can be reduced. But there will be situations. A good example would be if a beaver were to find its way into a canal system that was an embanked canal. You don't really want beavers burrowing through the side of an embanked canal. It could be very expensive. So translocation is an important tool. It's not one that we've had to carry out so far. Finally, and this is obviously a difficult area to discuss, is lethal control. That it has to be absolutely the last resort. And I cannot see for the medium and even long term a need for that to be carried out. So so long as we are able to have new and other areas where beavers can be moved to, that can be translocated to, the need to get to that point of lethal control, I can't foresee that. We must dedicate as much of our time to make sure we're focusing our efforts on 1 to 4, and that step towards actually thinking about culling is the very, very last resort. But you could project forward, say, however many years, 50 years, when we actually have carrying capacity in a lot of our catchment areas, and beavers might be moving into areas where we can't tolerate them. Maybe it is alongside major infrastructure, water treatment works, a whole range of other things, and we aren't able to move them elsewhere. And it's at that point where the government will have to consider that difficult and final option. But all of our work, as I say, is focused on the first 4. So we don't want to dwell on that. And these are the sorts of tools, and in fact, what Leicestershire and Rutland have available to them now. So with the University of Exeter, we've been able to model what the sort of dam capacity in a given area would be. So what's the potential of beavers to dam in these landscapes, but also where there's conflicts. So that on the right-hand side, if you were to dam, beavers were to dam in a village next to a school, that's potentially areas of high conflict. So we're using these sorts of tools to influence where and how quickly we're able to respond to where there are management issues. The next tool in our armory is, well, how do we understand where these beaver populations are, given they're pretty nocturnal? They are difficult to monitor. You can't put radio tracking equipment on them. Or if you do, it's not good for the beaver's welfare. And I think we should be very much looking forward to just these being wild and not seen to be something we have to track left, right, and centre. The best way of understanding their populations is looking at their effects, and by monitoring where there are field signs is the best way. You then can use some very clever computer coding, which when we're monitoring the whole of those catchment areas, you can see here on the top left, 2015. 2 clusters of beaver activity. Now projecting on to 2021, we've got more than 20 beaver territories over that time and clustered in all different areas. And it's very clear to be able to do that through looking at their field signs. These are really mobile animals. This is something that we've learnt. So we did, because we've got a very we're starting from a low base in terms of the number of beavers in the River Otter, and we wanted to introduce new animals so that there was greater genetic diversity. So one animal was released right down at the very lower end of the River Otter. It was tagged, it had its nice pretty pink ear tags on, its little earrings. Not much later, it was right at the top of the catchment. So they have the capacity to move long distances, especially if they're not butting up against other beaver populations. The thing that will stop them moving through a landscape is, in effect, other territories, because they will be scared of them. You don't want to get a clip around the ear when you're trying to move through another territory. But these are things we need to bear in mind, where they're going to go, their mobility, where the populations are, because that helps us to direct where our efforts are focused. Now, some of the effects, and the most notable effects, are in terms of their coppicing of woody vegetation. They're there to eat the cambium of the tree. That's some of the most nutritious parts. This, in most cases, goes unnoticed unless you're a naturalist and you're spotting these sorts of things, or if a tree happens to fall on your head as you're walking by. But sometimes they fell just the wrong trees. And some of those trees may have really high landscape value. They might be at high risk from, let's say, an infrastructure perspective. So we've tested and trialed some very low impact mitigation measures to those which are a bit more visually intrusive, but effectively sandy paint. We've used a similar to PVA mixed with sand. If you've ever eaten sandwiches on the beach, that's what it's like for beavers. They don't like it at all. If you reapply that every couple of years, it really puts them off. So some really simple ways of being able to reduce the impact on some high value trees. If the beavers do love apples, surprisingly enough, they love apple trees. So preempting where there could be conflict is really important. So we knew this orchard was right next to the river. It's a stunning orchard. It's well loved by the owners. They make some great cider there. So wrap the trees in some weld mesh. Simple. But things get a bit more significant when you're in low-lying areas. So get into the floodplains, and the beavers have the potential to do this sort of thing. In the headwaters, all of these multiple small dams generally have less impact on that whole wider landscape. But when you're in flat, low-lying fields which are internally drained, a dam in the wrong place can quite quickly back up quite a few hectares of land. Now, from our perspective, that's wonderful. If that's right next to your milking parlour, which it was, and a 200 head of dairy animals, that's probably not something you wish to see. So you have various ways of managing that. You could either remove the dam, like Jake is here, is one of our field officers. That can be a bit of a war of attrition. Beavers are busy. You keep removing the dams, they put them back. And they're actually, the landowners in this case felt that they could tolerate a certain amount of wetting in their land, but not too much. If we just allowed the beavers carte blanche, they would have significantly increased that. So this is where flow devices come in. So we believe beavers are triggered to dam by the sound of running water. So if you pipe around the side of their dam, you can actually lower the water behind it without them working out why their dam's not holding water. We call them flow devices. There's Hugh there putting one in with a weld mesh around the outside to make sure a beaver doesn't get stuck in it. Elsewhere, they're called beaver deceivers, which a fantastic name. So that gives you the ability to lower and raise water tables to a level which is tolerated by the landowners in that given area. And as you can see here, results are great. What we don't advocate, though, is that these aren't a panacea. They aren't something that you want to see throughout our landscapes, but in some specific situations, they work well. There are other things that you just don't think about in beaver mitigation, and beavers burrow. You know, they burrow into banks. They do that to have fine security. And here, if they're alongside a river, and you've got very heavy machinery tracking along, for example, in this case, harvesting maize, you really don't want a £300,000 forage harvester dropping into a beaver burrow. So we've actually gone around, in this case, putting canes with markers where these beaver burrows are, so they don't drop the kit in there. Should we say crop damage? Yes, is something to bear in mind, but generally their impacts are very low. In this instance, probably 15 or 20 pounds worth of damage to a maize crop, which is more than tolerated by the landowners in that case. Waterlogging is a different matter, and that's where you do need to step in. In terms of infrastructure, these are things that we are really conscious about. And if you go to the continent, where beavers have normalized in landscapes, volunteers and others are just constantly monitoring features like this. You don't want beavers building dams upstream of culverts. That is just unnecessary conflict. And those areas we have volunteers and support from communities just to keep an eye on things. And the first signs, you tend to get a gnawn stick, and you keep a watch on it just to make sure that you don't have what are they basically avoidable flood situations. But those communities are so grateful that they've got beavers upstream, because that's reducing their flood risks. You just don't want those localized problems. So earlier I talked about this management hierarchy, going from 1 to 5. The speed you go down that hierarchy from education and awareness through to translocation depends on what you're able to offer those landowners in terms of support for management. And this is, I think, a wonderful image of the vision of what our wetlands could look like. This is a beaver managed landscape. We need to be able to support landowners to make space for water. This is allowing beavers to push water out into the floodplain and create this huge range of amazing benefits that there are for society, for nature. But landowners need to be rewarded for that. And we've got what we call a wicked problem. So we have people which are providing all of these wonderful services for people downstream that receive very little benefit for doing that. Those that receive all of the benefits incur no cost. So how do we reverse that scenario? And that's where we're at the moment looking at how we can get people, businesses, to invest in supporting landowners to make space for water in this way, so that we can see that vision beneath us here pushed all the way downstream. Other areas that we're involved in, I'm conscious of time and I know you probably have to get on with the AGM, so I'll move on, but that is exactly what it looks like. We're checking the beaver health there by taking fecal samples. It's very important in the early stages of the trial, and less so now because we've demonstrated that the beavers are thriving. And beavers are in the news. These are a wonderful news story. They give me a huge amount of hope in terms of being able to restore health to our wetlands, but we've really got to do this in a, and I hope what I've conveyed today, in a responsible way. Yeah, we can live alongside these animals, but it takes quite a lot of effort. The rewards are just so worth it, but non-intervention is just not an option. These are ecosystem engineers, and people's houses, livelihoods potentially at risk if we get to a point where we just let the animals get on with it. But with the right sort of interventions, everyone can win, and we can have thriving beavers, great communities that are protected by these animals and minimal risks. And this is really summed up by some of the results that we had from, again, the University of Exeter, but great friend and in an independent researcher, Professor Richard Brazier, who led the science and evidence work, just showed really in his final statements, which were given to DEFRA, what impact this had. So just to read that through, that the outcomes of our 5-year study demonstrate the wide range of positive benefits that beavers can bring. These include flood attenuation, water quality improvement, carbon storage, greater biodiversity and socioeconomics, benefit to local businesses through wildlife tourism. We show that any conflicts can be managed swiftly and efficiently, and also that the benefits of beavers far outweigh any costs associated with their management. And finally, our research illustrates the overwhelming majority of society would like to see this native species return to our waterways. And that's certainly our vision across the whole of the wildlife trusts, to see beavers back across the whole of the British Isles. So futures of beavers in England. The work isn't done. We've just started, and there's a lot of next steps and key decisions that need to be made. First, great, we've got beavers which are protected. They're back in the wild. There is a risk that they're just constrained to small areas. So we are calling nationally for there to be an ambitious strategy for wild releases in many other areas across the country. There are people chomping at the bit to bring these animals back, and for us to share our knowledge and experience of what it means to be living alongside them. We need there to be a secure future for the wild populations which are out there, which are currently, should we say, unsanctioned. These need to be recognised as wild populations, and then we can give support to all of those landowners and communities which are there. And finally, we need to make sure that there's financial support for landowners who make space for beaver landscapes. By doing that, we ensure that their benefits are maximised, the risks minimised, and that it's an equitable relationship. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope I nearly stuck to time, but I think there might be some questions at this point, but I'm happy to be flexible given you've got the AGM on pause.
Thank you, Pete. That was brilliant. And having been involved in licensing of beaver releases in the early days, to see the benefits and see the impact they're having is wonderful. Really interesting. I'll wait for some people to put some, if there are any questions you want to raise to Pete, just put them into the question panel, and I'll pick up the ones I can. I can see there's one already. In our chat, if I can find it. Yeah, which is something that was going through my mind. So the question we've had is, are you finding enough space for moving sub-adults, so I guess these are the young, from breeding adults into new areas?
They're doing that naturally. So within the River Otter, they are far below carrying capacity at the moment. They've got, it's about 65 kilometres from top to bottom. We've got about 20 or so populations. The ecological capacity of that could be in the order of about over 100 populations. So yeah, there's plenty of space. There's a difference though between ecological carrying capacity and social, and you'll reach social carrying capacity before ecological, and it's at that stage where we may have to be moving animals. But we've just got one tiny catchment in Devon, relatively tiny, where these animals are. And the key will be making sure that we have a license to be able to move those animals much further afield. and exchange animals from different catchments so that we've got that genetic diversity.
Thanks, Pete. There's some questions coming in about, and this feels a little unfair, about whether there is suitable land within Leicestershire and Rutland where beavers may be able to be released. I guess what would be interesting is how did you go about identifying where are the best locations for beavers? What sort of working was involved before you got to release stage?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We were benefited because the beavers were already there. So yeah, the release locations were where they had been trapped from. But I think that there's certainly some lessons that I've learned in that if we were to identify the perfect location for releasing beavers, it would not have been the River Otter from an ecological perspective. What made it successful was because of the social environment that we release those animals into, and that you've got to give as much weight to as the ecological suitability. You know, beavers are thriving there, but our ecological way of determining what they have been thrived, we would have probably put them somewhere slightly less controversial, slightly less developed. But the fact that there was really great public access, people were able to see these animals, and from many kilometers of footpath alongside the river, that made such a difference. People were able to learn, find out, experience, explore without having to be taken and shown this. And that made a big difference, you know, so the communities all around them felt that they had a real sense of ownership. And sometimes, I think the decision we might make purely ecologically, don't play enough emphasis on that social element. So when you think about that in your landscapes, I would be choosing areas where you've got great public access. Beavers are fine. They can cope with disturbance. We've got beavers out with a forage harvester driving by, shaking the ground, and they just don't worry at all. Those sorts of things would worry us beforehand, but you see them and how they behave, and they're very relaxed.
We've got a couple. I'm trying to combine a few of the questions, but what happens when beavers sort of reach their density within a catchment?
Well, we don't have some of the major predators of beavers in this country that there once were. So wolves would have been a principal predator. The greatest cause of mortality within beavers are other beavers. They are fiercely territorial, and as animals butt up against each other, those wounds can sometimes be life-threatening. So long before that time, really is about moving those animals to new catchments, and being able to spread them out into other areas. So yeah, it's a really important question, but we're many years behind where that situation will be.
I'm not sure where we are, Anne. I'm suggesting we go with one more question, and what we'll perhaps do is try to answer some of the questions, because people have sent in lots of really interesting questions. But there's one here that was going through my mind as well as you were talking about the genetic diversity of the beavers if we're releasing them. What are we doing around that?
The critical thing is making it's quite crude, mix it up as possible. We inevitably, these animals are starting from quite low genetic diversity, but in many cases that can be quite natural. If you think about historically, beavers were in a river catchment, one beaver would have made it over the top of the catchment to a new area. At that time, we weren't thinking, oh gosh, we need 60 or 70 beavers to make this, as genetically diverse as possible. So often these species do start from quite a low genetic base. However, it's in our gift to make it as diverse as possible. So within the otter, we moved 5 additional animals in from Scotland to increase the genetic vigor. What we're proposing in the future is actually like exchange programs between different catchments, because we know they're more than likely Bavarian origin, and the Bavarian beavers are quite genetically diverse. So we have that foundation is now about, okay, we have a few founding animals in the River Otter. We've added to that. Now let's move those animals between catchments and move animals back so that we can actually increase that diversity. That's very easily said. It's quite difficult to do, because in order for their welfare, you need to be pairing animals up, making sure that there's suitable habitat for them that isn't already occupied by other animals, so that you don't basically release them into a situation where they might be beaten up by their neighbours.
Hey, thanks so much. We've got a few more questions in there. What I'll do is I'll send these on to Pete and see if we can get some brief answers, and we'll put them online after. We've got some fantastic web resources as well. So all of our work has been written up, which is on our Devon Wildlife Trust website. So there'll be a huge range of answers to quite technical questions right through to just FAQs. So yeah, have a look there as well. Pete, thanks ever so much. We've had some challenges with our VC, but the benefit is that we get people like Pete to be able to come and dial in and tell us about work going on in Devon, which is amazing to see. And I would so endorse if you get the opportunity to go and see some of these sites, because from my experience, the level of change in engineering that these animals do are just outstanding. And it's incredible to see what they're doing. But Pete, thanks ever so much for coming and giving that presentation. It's much appreciated. And yeah, really great to hear from you. Thank you all. Thank you. Privilege. I will hand back now to Jo, shall I?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I think it's over to Anne now. We'll resume official business, and hopefully the polls will work this time. So apologies for earlier.
Yes, and again, apologies. This is our third Zoom AGM, and we haven't had a problem like that before. So anyway, you live and learn, and at least you've had the exciting talk to start with, which hope that means you're really enthusiastic about carrying on with the official business of the evening. Please do hang around for the official business, because it's your wildlife trust. You know, we want your views on, as we need to under our constitution, ask you questions every year, but we want you participating in the official business of the trust. Okay, we're now moving on to one of the more should we say chunky items on the agenda, which is the report of the council. So the annual review that you've received is really a summarised version of the annual report that's made by the council, which forms part of the statutory accounts. But the annual review will give you details of important events in the trust's life and progress against its charitable objects over the year 2021 to 22. Not yet. Tonight, we're also going to be looking a little further ahead, because with the adoption of our new strategy at the very beginning of the current financial year, with so many challenges being faced by the natural world at the moment, there's a lot of work going on in Trust to realign our organisation so we can deliver that important strategy for wildlife and nature's recovery. So I'm going to talk about the events for the year ended 31st March 2022, which is the year under consideration at this AGM. But Matt is going to bring us bang up to date with information about how the Trust is gearing up to tackle the most important issues of our lifetimes, which is the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, and how we're going to play a key role in bringing nature back locally. So looking at the year ended 31st of March 2022, I think I would say it's been a mixed year. The two main drivers for the year have been, first of all, for consolidating the operations of the Trust after the destabilising impacts of the global pandemic, and in particular, the economic impacts and their effect on our finances. And the second main driver has been looking forward and preparing the Trust for that delivery of the new strategy. And these two drivers have meant that the development of a new approach to our work and some significant changes in both the year under review and the next. The annual review gives a good deal of detail about the year's work, so I'll just highlight some key elements. Thanks, Jo. So some great news to kick off with. We're delighted that during the year we were able to complete the acquisition of Chase Meadow 2, an important piece of the jigsaw of grasslands within the Charnwood area. And we've been able to do that because of the generosity of members and others who responded so positively to our appeal in the previous year. We're also able to extend Cossington Meadows by a small acquisition as well. Next, please. As you might expect, during the year, there's been a great deal of habitat management, and there's been lots of varied aspects to that. We've had our innovative project in using pigs for management in Charnwood. We've put new native plant hedgerows in Cossington and a new wader island at Walnut Meadows. Woodland planting has started at the Holwell extension. There's been new woodland planting at Rutland Water and improvements there to lagoon edges of particular interest to our wildfowl. And of course, there's been significant amounts of grassland management throughout the Charnwood reserves. Next, please. We also carried out a great deal of monitoring and recording, and the annual review highlights this. A key example has been our bat work in the Leafield Forest living landscape. This recording activity gives us some great data on the elusive barbastelle, but also a lot of bat species in the areas, and thanks also to the volunteers who built a phenomenal number of bat boxes to help this project. We've continued our participation in the Charnwood Forest Landscape Partnership Scheme, which is a 3.7 million project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, with 18 linked projects and 18 partner organisations. And meanwhile, at Rutland Water Nature Reserve, the recording activities of staff there, supported by volunteer recorders, have identified record numbers in certain species and some new and exciting finds, particularly within the invertebrate category. We received a question to the AGM asking about how we intend to utilise the large amounts of data that's been collected during our work, especially by volunteer recorders, and in particular whether we are contemplating resource to help with data analysis. The short answer to this is yes. What we're very clear about is that we need to make sure that, first of all, we have a good baseline data for establishing the condition of our reserves and the land around them, so we can measure progress towards nature's recovery in our counties. So the quality as well as the quantity of information that's being gathered will be really important. And it's also important to remember that we've got a finite quantity of resources, both staff and volunteer time, and to make sure that the monitoring is really targeted in the areas where we need it. So part of the new approaches to the work to deliver our new strategy will certainly be ensuring that the monitoring data which is being generated is what we really need and where we really need it. Next, please, Jo. I mentioned the resources at our disposal, and this slide, I think, demonstrates in particular how our volunteer teams produce such an extraordinary amount of data and commit an extraordinary amount of time in helping the Trust in this respect. And we're extremely grateful to all our volunteer teams for that time and effort. Next, please, Jo. We have a big interest in ensuring that we look outward rather than looking inward, and that we build partnerships and relationships with other people and organisations who will help promote the protection and enhancement of wildlife and biodiversity. Our new strategy will mean that even more emphasis will be placed on this area in future. Some interesting examples here of what that advocacy work has been directed on over the last year. One has been biodiversity training to parish councils, so that they can be better equipped to deal with their legal obligations to protect biodiversity, and also more adept at using mechanisms such as neighbourhood plans to protect green spaces and species in local areas. We've also been participating in a pilot local nature recovery network, working with various partners such as Natural England, Leicestershire County Council, National Forest and the Environment Agency. We've had a question to the AGM about whether we can use the inclusion of lawned woods within the Queen's Green Canopy in order to further a nature recovery network. Short answer is I don't know how useful that is going to be specifically, but we certainly have plans for more development of the Leafield Forest living landscape area where there's a good deal of scope. And incidentally, Matt and I today attended the launch of a really exciting project centred on the Rockingham Forest, and we hope that there will be scope for partnership working with county councils and other stakeholders to boost our living landscape area. Of course, we've also been active in supporting various national petitions and campaigns spearheaded by the Wildlife Trust Federation, including Stopping Peat Extraction, campaign against pesticides, COP26 climate change, and the perennial battle against HS2. And we've also been supporting national campaigns in a more positive way, should we say, including Wild About Gardens and Action for Insects. And we had our highest number of households participating in 30 Days Wild during the year. Next, please, Joe, thanks. Our education and outreach work has continued in spades over the year, even though it's been impacted at times by COVID restrictions and the need to be careful about venues. We've got Wild Forest School still active, generously supported by players of the People's Postcode Lottery, and it's enabling children to have positive hands-on experiences in the outdoors. Wildlife Watch continues with 2 groups, and we are training up some more watch leaders. We were able to resume wild play and family events after the pandemic. And at Rutland Water, it was great to see the resumption of the wonderful project Time in Nature, helping dementia sufferers and their carers. The Green Influences project, supported by the Ernest Cook Trust, continues to inspire groups of young people to create their own environmental and social action projects within schools, youth groups and local communities. We currently have 79 young people engaged. Linda Visitor Centre experimented with being open all year, and that allowed new activities to be run from there, such as arts and crafts, bringing new people to discover Linden as a destination. And thanks as ever to our local volunteer groups who, either online or back with face-to-face meetings, were able to continue with their programs of walks and talks for members and others, which are always popular. Next, please, Joe, thanks. Have to give a special mention to our Osprey project here, 25 years and the 200th chick. An amazing achievement. And of course, there's been worldwide interest in the bird's activities this year, and that extends to World Osprey Week, which once again generated a huge amount of interest nationally and internationally. Next, please, Joe, thanks. It's essential for any organisation to have a strong profile and presence, and that's not just in digital, but all the varied forms of media communication. Of course, our membership publications have a good circulation, but it's great to see that our website is getting more visitors, and we're able to use that for things such as retail opportunities, and our social media platforms are seeing increased traction, which means we have new avenues for engagement with people. Next, thanks. Our Honorary Treasurer is going to talk in detail about the financial results of the year in the next agenda item, but I just wanted to log a few important aspects of how we keep running the Trust running. We saw a welcome increase in membership numbers this year after a difficult time in 2020 and 21, and that's been helped by our membership team finding new avenues to attract members. We ended the year, ended 31st March 2022 with 17,910 members, which was an increase of over 1,500. However, the cost of living crisis will no doubt have an impact in the longer term. During the year, we ran 3 appeals, with our 65th anniversary appeal raising 23,000, including gift aid. Thanks to everyone who contributed. We continue to augment our corporate supporter programme. The Melton Mowbray Building Society is a real stalwart of that, but we've got new members as well, such as Brocklesby Pies. Once again, we're extremely grateful for the generosity of supporters who have remembered the Trust in their wills, and the annual review gives details of those kind people whose legacies helped the Trust this year. We continue to build our legacy and memorial funding programme. But I think the point I particularly want to emphasise here is the importance of upgrading our effectiveness and building revenue to support that. We embarked on this strategy pre-COVID, and we need to continue it if our organisation is going to respond to the tremendous challenges the natural world faces, and which our new strategy to 2030 is designed to tackle. And Andy Thorpe will discuss this further in his report to the AGM. And next, Sue, thanks. A few important events just worth noting here. I've talked throughout about our strategy to 2030, bringing nature back. This strategy was developed over the course of the year under review by both staff and trustees. It's our own strategy, but it also dovetails into the national strategy of the Wildlife Trust Federation. So as part of the whole Wildlife Trust movement, we are acting locally and nationally at the same time. The strategy is a key moment in the life of the Trust, and as I noted earlier, it's going to mark a new way of working for us all, and Matt's going to talk further about this in a moment. I have to mention the sea dragon, of course I do, and many congratulations for Joe Davis for identifying this absolutely world-beating fossil in the Lagoon 4 mud at Rutland Water. It generated a huge amount of topical interest at the time, but its lasting legacy will be in its return to Rutland. We're participating in a partnership with Anglian Water and Rutland County Council to work out how best to restore the fossil to the county, and we will seek in that partnership to showcase the work of the Trust. It's early days yet, as the sea dragon is currently undergoing preservation, but this will be an interesting project to come. I'm going to have to hit a sad note now in talking about the ending of Bird Fair. I personally found it very sad that we had to bring our involvement in it to an end. Our reasons for doing so were very clearly spelled out in our communique at the time, but just to recap, before COVID, trustees have been keen to re-profile the event so that it had less dependence on the high carbon footprint of foreign travel and focused more on UK wildlife. With the advent of COVID, we saw an increased and in fact untenable business risk. This was coupled with the realisation that we needed to concentrate far more on the Trust's specific charitable mission rather than on an event which gave nothing back to support that mission. We tried very hard over 2 years to see if we could reconcile these various difficult aspects of running Bird Fair, but in the end we found that the situation was intractable. A particularly sad aspect was having to say goodbye to our extremely competent and professional Bird Fair team who left us in early 2022. We at the Trust remain very proud of our legacy of what we achieved running Bird Fair for 21 years, but we're also very clear that our decision to cease involvement in it was rooted in prudence and realism. And finally, I would like to extend my thanks and those of the Trust to Michael Singh and Martin Hunt, who both served consecutively as interim CEO. Their hard work over the first half of 2022 kept the Trust working as effectively as possible until, after a robust recruitment process, Matt came on board at the end of August this year. Final one, please, Joe. And so this is the end of my part of the report to Council. I said at the beginning we had 2 drivers for the year. We needed to consolidate after COVID, and that's what we've been doing. And we also needed to prepare the way for delivering our new strategy, and our work over the year has started the realignment of our resources, which is needed to turn that strategy into reality. And I'm now going to hand over to Matt for the second part of this agenda item.
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everybody. I wanted to just give you a bit of a reflection on the current issues across the broad conservation sector at the moment, and then also look at our plans in terms of the Trust going forward. I'll try to answer some of the questions which have been raised to me beforehand, so I'll feed these in. So firstly, you've probably seen a lot of phrases discussing and a lot of discussion in the press about an attack on nature. And I just wanted to outline where this had come from and what our response is to it as well. So it refers to a number of government announcements which have been made, as well as one leak which came out from a national newspaper. And in all cases of these, it's the details which are going to be really important to us. So in the top left-hand corner, it started with a government promoting the creation of what they called investment zones. And these were areas where economic growth were going to be a primary concern and the primary driver for any development. Where the concern from the Wildlife Trust came and other conservation bodies was it was unclear how environmental and wildlife considerations would be dealt with for any new proposals. And it was that uncertainty that led to concerns being raised. The next bit that came out was a leak around ELMS, and ELMS is the environmental land management system which DEFRA developed in order to pay land managers to manage their land for environmental benefit and services. And there was a leak that came out that there was going to be a rapid review in DEFRA to see whether we were going to continue to pay for benefits or whether it was simply going to be payments on the basis of how much land somebody owned. We've had no confirmation that review actually took place formally, although it's fairly broadly accepted that it did. And we still don't have any details of what ELMS is going to look like. So that just led to a raft of concerns about what's going to happen to a really important land management scheme that can help to make real improvements in our environment. In the green box, there's the Retained EU Law Act. And this was important because this is the proposals for transposing EU legislation into UK law following Brexit. And an awful lot of the EU legislation is critical to wildlife. It contains things like the Habitats Directive. So again, the Act would define the process for that legislation coming into UK legislation. And the concern was how that would be done and how it would be decided which pieces of legislation would be adopted or not. So again, a real concern around the detail of what that might mean. And finally, there was an announcement about a lifting of a ban on fracking. So if people aren't aware, fracking is the extraction of shale gas, and it basically involves injecting water at high pressure down into shale deposits, which causes fractures through which the gas can be collected. There was a moratorium back in 2019 because there were measured earth tremors, and that caused the process to stop at the time. And that's now been reviewed, and the ban has been lifted. There are concerns. If you look into shale gas and fracking, it's a highly complex science. Not only do you inject water down into the system, but there are chemicals in that water that keep those fractures open once the water is removed. So there were concerns about potential pollution. There were concerns about restarting fracking and what that might mean for the environment. So again, looking at those proposals really closely. If we can click on Joe, thank you. So there was quite a response, and I've just put up a selection there that show you the sort of the diversity that came back from across the board, concerns about what was perceived to be a whole number of acts that potentially have the impact on nature. The difference, I think, is there was quite a cohesive response this time from a range of organisations. The small photo there is quite unique, really, which includes Hilary McGrady from the National Trust in the centre, Becky Sprate from the RSPB, and R. Craig Bennett from the Royal Society for Wildlife Trusts, all coming together to speak in unity about their concerns about the action being taken. If you could just click again. And so, of course, we responded locally to that as well. And what we were saying here was effectively, the devil is in the detail. All these things are concerning us. So we wrote to all MPs, all the leaders, basically saying, when you are discussing these and making decisions, please make sure that nature and wildlife gets fully considered in the way those decisions are made. And we've had quite a good response back, and those that haven't responded, we will pursue and make sure we have those conversations. And these sort of engagement are happening across all the wildlife trusts, but it's where we engage locally. Thank you. I just wanted to move on to just talk about our trust and very briefly look at what our plans are going forward. So as Anne described, we now have a clear strategy fundamentally around nature recovery and about engaging and empowering communities to take action. That results in us needing to make some changes in the way that we work. We need to make sure how we work is aligned to delivering this strategy, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And also we need to make some changes to address financial challenges around some of the deficit budgets that Andy will cover later. So it's an ambitious strategy we have, and I just want to go into detail around the key elements that we've got. So if we've got the next slide. Can we get the next slide, Joe, on the... Oh, thank you. So looking at conservation, in our strategy, our ambition is that we are looking to have a third of land supporting our nature recovery. And historically, we've managed our own reserves. We put a lot of effort into managing our reserves, but we've not done a lot of work beyond the boundary of our sites. The map that you see there shows you our land holdings. And when you look at that, you understand that if we're going to get near to delivering our ambition, we've got to be looking, working and influencing actively beyond our own sites. We're not going to buy our way into that, you know, delivering a third of the land into supporting nature recovery. So nature reserves will always be important to us, both as important in their own inherent ways, but also exemplars of what must be done, you know, what can be done by land managers. But we also need to make sure that we have some resource available so that we can influence beyond our land. And the way we've structured that, and we're proposing to structure it, is to have a dedicated reserve management team workingly effectively across Leicestershire and Rutland to look after our sites, but then also creating a nature recovery team that looks to support our work beyond our sites, influencing land managers and policymakers and looking for opportunities to enhance our biodiversity. There are other two key areas as well we want in terms of our influencing. The first is around using the biological data that we have. So we collect a lot of data. What we need to be able to do is manage that and use it and interpret it in a way that we can put together a coherent narrative to persuade people of the urgency of working and protecting our biodiversity. And also looking for opportunities like biodiversity net gain, where there are real opportunities for us to make a difference. One of the key questions I was asked about staff changes in conservation. I wanted to outline a bit of that. So we are currently carrying a vacancy around our head of conservation role. I didn't go straight out to recruit that immediately because I wanted to get the thinking around what I've described to you here and exactly what I wanted the focus of that role to be. I think we've now got a clearer picture of what we're going to ask that person to do, the external influencing as well as the reserve management element. So we are planning to go out to recruit that shortly. And I'm expecting us to have our advert out hopefully in a few weeks' time. We've also lost some reserve staff over the past months. So we replaced John Bristow, who went off to work for the City Council in a very good job, another environmental job, but we replaced him with Sarah Bedford. Our trainee in Leicestershire has also been successful in finding work with the City Council. So again, we will replace that role, which is key to our delivery. And also, I mean, the trainee roles are the roles that we expect. You know, we train them up so that they can find work in conservation. So that's exactly what those roles are intended for. When Neil left recently, we then took the opportunity, because Neil was working primarily around reserves in the Charnwood area, we took the opportunity to draw the reserve team together. And I asked them a question about what resource did they need, what level of resource to be able to manage across all of our nature reserves and keep them to the standard that we wanted. And as a result of that, we're looking to appoint at least an additional temporary assistant role to support us in the coming months whilst we review further what we can do with the staff we've currently got. So that would leave us in reserve management of a staff of about 11, including Rutland Water, plus all our volunteers, of course, in order to manage our nature reserves. And then we're looking to increase our commitment around nature recovery. So at the moment, and we have a little more work to do around structures and costing of our structures, but we're probably looking at 2 posts in nature recovery to make sure that we can do that influencing outside, that advocacy and that working with other sites and beyond our sites. In the interim, we've contracted Helen O'Brien, who was the Senior Conservation Officer at Leicester City, to support us with some of the projects we're doing and make sure that we can still continue to deliver those. If we can move on to the next, moving on to engagement. We have an ambition to aspire and engage with 1 in 4 individuals across Leicestershire and Rutland. That 1 in 4 figure is based on research, but that's the proportion of the population that you need in order to start to generate a self-perpetuating movement. So that will actually become a cause that people are getting behind. There's a word map here of sort of the reflections, which is quite nice, of how people have found engagement, and particularly Team Wilder. We've started this work through our Next Door to Nature project, which is led by Helen Fairhead. We've appointed a project lead for it, and we're starting now to do our work around Leicester to engage with communities and hard to reach groups to try to engage them more in environmental issues. We're also looking at our education activities to see how we best can deliver those, what we should be trying to achieve, and how we fund those activities. If you can bring up the next slide. And then we've got some in the strategy, some general areas about how we work. Income generation and fundraising is really important to us. It was a focus that I felt we needed more emphasis on. So we are in the throes at the moment of recruiting a fundraising manager because we are quite a lean organisation. We work quite efficiently. It's key to us in order to grow, to do what we want to do, to be able to bring more funding into that. We also, of course, want to build more support for our cause, which is why we're putting a really focus around our supported development as well. And then we just want to operate as a well-run, professional, modern organisation, looking after our people, reflecting the sustainability needs. So we've done a load of work which is starting at the moment, and we're in the process of, such as we're developing new HR policies where we needed those. We've implemented an improved health and safety system and approach. We're looking at the ways of working to see how we can modernise and make it as efficient as we can be. We're starting to look at development around our training and development of our staff and our teams so that they're well equipped to do what we need. We've reviewed all our assets to see what their value and what their management is. So all these measures being implemented to try to make sure that we're working as efficiently as effectively as we can. And if we can go on to the final slide, I just wanted to emphasise where we're looking to put more effort going forward in the future years. The first is working with land managers. As I described, we need to work with others if we're to meet our strategy. The second is I think we really need to make sure that we are advocating on behalf of nature and punching above our weight so that we are putting forward the arguments about why nature is important in a very coherent way. And one of the key ways to that, I think, is building our evidence base and using all the monitoring and recording that is done in a more effective way so we can describe what is happening to wildlife and nature in Leicester and in Rutland. That's a post that I would like to see in our Recovering to Nature team. And the other post I would like to see in our Recovering to Nature is all around new opportunities. And to me, the biodiversity net gain, which is an element of planning which is passed in legislation, but the guidance hasn't come out yet. So it's not being truly implemented yet, but it will require developers to have an overall increase in biodiversity when they're developing their site. And that could either be on site or it could be compensatory off site. To me, that feels like an absolutely huge opportunity which we have to grasp. And we need somebody who's all over that and being able to look at how we can make real nature gains through those sort of initiatives that come up. And I think I'll stop there and thank you for that. Joe, I'll hand back to you.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I believe we're about to do the next vote. Is that right now?
Yeah, Joe.
Right. So we now come to the resolution for the adoption of the report of the council for the year ended 31st March 2022. The proposer is Jackie Morell and the seconder is Jenny Harris. I'd like to ask members to vote on this resolution, and there will be 1 minute for voting.
And whilst that's going on for a minute, at this time of year, the cold weather can make it really hard for wildlife to find food and shelter. You can help by putting out bird feeders, building log shelters, providing water, or building homes for hedgehogs. You can also think about reducing your food waste, composting, or taking steps to have an eco-Christmas. We have lots of great ideas and simple actions you can take to help wildlife at home on our website. So I'll just put a link in the chat again. Got 10 seconds left. Okay. Voting is now ended. I'm just about to share the results. So it's 100% said yes and 0% said no.
Thank you, everybody, for voting on that resolution. We now move to the, if we can move on to the next resolution. Thanks, Joe. We're now moving on to the report of the Honorary Treasurer. And I'm now going to hand over to Andy Thorpe, our Honorary Treasurer, who's going to present his report for the year ended 31st March 2022 in relation to the financial statements for that year.
Thank you, Anne. I have to start by saying thank you to Anne for her many years of stewarding the finances of the Trust and for then agreeing to step up and do different work for the Trust as its chair. Anne was Treasurer for around 20 years, which is amazing. And in honour of that, I'm using one of her pictures here on this slide. Having retired from being a Chief Finance Officer of a Midlands biotech company, it's great to be able to use my financial experience for a charity I've been a member of for over 20 years. Next slide. So when you look at the full financial picture for the year to March 22, unfortunately, the overall thing that stands out is we spent more money than we received. Some of this is just the natural timing differences of when money comes in and is spent. In particular, with restricted funds given for a specific purpose, where it's not unusual to receive money in one year and spend it in another, and around 40,000 of our overspend is related to that. We faced difficult decisions around bird fair during the financial year, and whilst we had a lottery grant that enabled us to spend time and money to look at what might be possible and see if a way forward could be worked out, the decision was made that we could not find a workable way forward. The closure costs, including 3 redundancies, we had to cover ourselves, as the grant would not cover those costs. So this is around 36,000 of the loss. However, a large part of the excess expenditure has been incurred as part of the investment and development programme we commenced pre-COVID, designed to increase trust capacity and effectiveness. This investment remains essential for the delivery of the Trust's new strategy, which was launched in April. However, we need to recognise that those investments may take 2 or 3 years to turn around into improved performance. We're still on that path, always looking closely to see what we can afford any expenditure that is higher than income, always looking to see where we can improve income as quickly as possible, and always looking to see we do not run ahead of ourselves and spend too quickly compared to the reserves and income we have. When looking at the year ended March 22 and comparing to the year ended March 21, we need to recognise that these were very different years in many ways, due largely to the pandemic. The year to March 21 was much more significantly impacted by COVID. Shop sales, Osprey cruises were much lower. Work that could be done on the reserve was reduced, therefore expenditure was lower. This included at Rutland, which therefore reduced the income from Anglian Water for managing this reserve. That is the vast majority of the consultancy fee income you see. But the unspent amounts were allowed to be carried forward to the next year, so in the long run, we were not missing out. COVID grants received were significant, a lot, including some furlough monies. Face-to-face recruitment was very much restricted, but membership levels, despite initial fears, did not see a hit during the first year of the pandemic. We had one very large legacy that made that year well above the average level for legacy income. In the year to March 22, shop sales and Osprey cruises moved closer to being back to normal. Whilst early in the year there were still some COVID restrictions, work on the reserves picked back up and we spent more on this, catching up with some delayed work, including some at Rutland, leading to the catch-up of consultancy fee income. There were no equivalent COVID-related grants compared to what we'd received in the prior year. Face-to-face recruitment ran for the whole year, but the economic conditions of the country got harder with increased inflation, and we started to see larger than usual losses of a membership in the second half of the year. Legacies, this was a more usual year, closer to the average level of income from that source. So where you see significant differences in many of the numbers between the years, much of the explanation is down to the underlying nature of those 2 years, making comparisons rather difficult. We've received a very detailed question relating to the increased level of fundraising costs, particularly given we have an overall reduction in membership, donation and legacy income as a total. In looking at the question, I would add that the costs under raising funds also covers work for applying for grants. So this income source should also be factored into the picture if you look at a cost per pound of funds raised. The other factor is that comparing costs in one year to funds raised in that same year is not always totally fair, as often much of the work and cost comes before the funds they generate, and so funds can come in the following year after the costs have been incurred. Also, when comparing year on year, when you have the 2 very different years due to COVID, the comparisons are not necessarily fair. The largest part of our fundraising costs is commissions given to the face-to-face recruiters, and for recruitment in, say, the final quarter of the year, you see very little income in that financial year, maybe 1 or 2 months of subscription, but have to pay the full commission. It so happens our most successful quarter of recruitment was the final quarter, and as we were still coming out of restrictions from the pandemic, our least successful was the first quarter. Our recruitment was very low in the 2020 pandemic year, so there were far few people to see a full year's income from in their first full year of membership. The year to March 2022, particularly in the second half, we unfortunately started to see an increasing number of members resigning, including some long-standing members due to the financial downturn. So despite membership growing by the most in the last 7 years on face recruitment, unfortunately, a proportion of that growth has been replacing members who have resigned rather than it being all new added income. We have ourselves started to review whether we're getting value for money from face-to-face recruitment. The initial analysis shows in the long term this method does make money, as a reasonable proportion of recruited members does stay for the long term. However, we will be continuing to review this recruitment method to ensure it gives us good value for money. We had another question about why investment gains were 118,000 in the prior year and only 2,000 in the current year. Our investments include some holdings of shares where gains are down to stock market movements, and those favoured the prior financial year. Also in the prior year, it was the point where a periodic revaluation was required of some property we hold where we get rental income, and it is therefore classed as investment property. But in the latest year, there was no equivalent revaluation required. Next slide. Looking specifically at the year to March 2022, of course, the one thing I cannot stop myself from saying is just a huge thank you to all our members for the money you so generously give to the organisation, whether through regular membership fees, other donations, or ultimately through legacies. Without this, we could not do the work that the Trust does. I know it's a difficult time for the country at large economically, and for some individuals in particular, things are harder than for others. So it was particularly good that we did still see membership income rising during these difficult times. Of course, if any of you are in a position to give a little more, I'm sure Joe or Georgina in the office will be pleased to receive a call to say you'd like to increase your membership fee or give a specific donation, maybe towards the appeal we launched with the annual report. Over time, we do want to try to increase how much we raise in grants, as more are becoming available, given nature recovery and climate change are becoming more and more a focus. This is our plan to ensure we can continue to grow and do more for our 2 counties' wildlife, and it will be strengthened by the current recruitment of a head of fundraising. Looking at expenditure, you can see monies are largely spent on our charitable work, on our nature reserves, on education work, in particular inspiring the next generation, and working with others to look towards a time where a larger part of our land in our counties can be seen as being managed for nature. Next slide. Turning to the balance sheet, at the end of the year, I know this can be rather confusing for some, but let me try to explain it. The heritage assets represent the costs we have incurred over the years on buying the Trust nature reserves. As you can see, these have increased by around 100,000 as we bought Chase Meadow 2 during the year. The tangible assets are the office in Leicester, the VTC centre up at Rutland, together with the office equipment, and also all the equipment and vehicles we need to work on our reserves. So of our total charity funds, a bit under 5.5 million, a little over 3.5 million is tied up in our nature reserves and the assets we need to do our work. In investments, 620,000 is represented by buildings, being a couple of houses we inherited alongside one of our nature reserves and part of our head office premises, and these are rented out, so we get income from those. The balance is some longer term financial investments. We then need working capital to cover the stock in our shop at Linden, to cover money owed to us that we will receive in the following year, and deal with creditors we have. The net position at March 2022 was that we actually owed close to 100,000 more than was owed to us or held in stock. But this is just a snapshot at that particular point in time. That then leaves cash. We've had a question as to whether our cash balance is all available to buy land. But unfortunately, the answer to that is no. The cash includes monies we've received for restricted purposes and will be spent on those specified projects. And we need a level of reserve to ensure we can manage through the ups and downs over the year, as income and expenditure timings can be different, and to cover for the rainy day if circumstances impact our income, like we might have seen in the 2020 with the pandemic, or for reasons that might be more specific to the trust in the future. If and when any suitable land became available to purchase, we'd need to raise specific funds to do so and or borrow money in the short term, depending on trust priorities. So in summary, we're very grateful for all our members do to fund a large proportion of our work, and we simply could not do the work we do without you. We'll continue to manage trust finances prudently whilst ensuring we deliver on our charitable objects. And with that, I'll hand back to Anne.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you for your report. Also, thank you for the huge amount of work you've put into your role as Honorary Treasurer since your appointment in November. And I can tell everybody in the meeting that the Trust is benefiting hugely from Andy's expertise. So I'd like to move to the resolution now for the adoption of the Honorary Treasurer's report for the year ended 31st March 2022 in relation to the financial statements for that year. The proposer is Graham Fisher and the seconder is Maggie Morland. Could I now ask you all to vote on the resolution, and there will be 1 minute for voting.
Whilst the voting is going on, I don't know if you're aware or have visited our online members hub. So we have a dedicated members hub, which is everything you need to make the most of your membership, including upcoming events, member competitions and offers, latest news and blogs, and also downloadable versions of our members magazine. I'll just put the link in the chat. We have 15 seconds left. We now end the poll, and it was 99% said yes and 1% said no. So share the results. Over to you, Anne.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now moving to the re-election of members to council to serve a 3-year term. The following members of council, John Belieby, Andrew Moffat and Peter Williams, have completed their 3-year term of office. John is now stepping down after about 12 years of tremendous support and participation as a trustee, and our organisation has benefited hugely from his contribution over that period. So I would like to express my thanks and that of the Trust as a whole to John, and also to some other trustees who have stepped down in the period since the last AGM. These were Maggie Morland, who was Honorary Secretary for more than 12 years, working tremendously hard for Trust throughout that period, and who stood down in April of this year. Linda Jones also stood down. She's been a trustee for a number of years, and most recently one of our newer trustees, Bev Smith. It's important to note that as well as taking up personal time, being a trustee requires dedication and commitment, and we're lucky that our trustees, past and present, have shown and continue to show that in spades. So I'd like to move to the resolution on this item. Andrew Moffat and Peter Williams, who have completed their 3-year term of office, have expressed their wish to stand for re-election. I'd like to take this item en bloc so that we vote in respect of both individuals together. The proposer is Anthony Biddle and the seconder is Helen Knott. So I'd now like to ask members to vote for the re-election of Andrew Moffat and Peter Williams, and the voting period will be 1 minute.
Okay, whilst the voting's going on, if you love being a member, why not give the gift of nature this Christmas and treat your loved ones to a gift membership? When you buy a gift membership, not only will you be given a unique and special gift, you'll also be supporting our vital work for wildlife. So while stocks last, gift memberships will also include a pack of beeswax wraps. I'll put a link to gift membership in the chat. Thank you. Just 10 seconds left to vote. The voting's now ended, and yes was 100% and no was 0%. Showing results.
So we're now moving to our final resolution, and that's one that's required by the Trust's Article of Association. It's a standard item at all AGMs. It's the appointment of PKF Smith Cooper Audit Limited as auditors to the Trust and approval for Council to set their remuneration. PKF Smith Cooper became our auditors in the early spring of this year, having taken over from RSM. This followed a detailed appointment process led by the Honorary Treasurer, considering various possible audit firms, and the recommendation of that process to appoint PKF was agreed by Trust Council. We now ask for the membership's formal agreement to their appointment as auditors and to allow Council to set their remuneration. The proposer is Becky Ward and the seconder is Andrew Moffat. So could I please ask the meeting now to cast their vote on this resolution, and there will be 1 minute for voting.
Thanks, Anne. Whilst the voting is going on, our local groups are welcoming you back with a wonderful lineup of events and wildlife talks starting in the new year. If you'd like to find out a bit more about your local group and how you can get involved, I'll share a link in the chat.
That people have asked throughout the meeting, the official business of the meeting. So we thought we'd try and pick these off now, as I promised earlier on. So this will sort of be between me and Matt. I'd just like to pick off the first one that was asked about whether, has anybody queried whether the AGM was called property while we're voting on it? You can absolutely blame me for this one. I had a bee in my bonnet about this. I felt sure that we'd had this as official business in previous AGMs and just didn't last year. The Honorary Treasurer said he didn't think that this was necessary, and I'm afraid I said, no, I think we're going to do it. So you can blame me for having to vote for an extra resolution, but it was not because anybody thought that we'd done anything wrong. It was just my interpretation of the articles of what we needed to vote upon. So I hope that's answered that question. If I could perhaps just therefore get Matt, would you like to pick off 1 or 2 of the other questions, please?
Yep, that's fine. So there's one here, I'll just read it out. Why have so many long-time staff left the Trust recently? What steps we take to retain them, and what steps we take to ensure that new staff wish to stay for the long term? Obviously, I have to respect confidentiality of all our individuals in a public meeting. But I would say that I think, you know, we need to look at our turnover. We should have a healthy turnover. We should have people moving in and out of the organisation. That's quite right. We want to ensure that we offer a good employment experience. So we are having conversations around our ways of working. And that includes things like flexible working, how we work, We're in discussions around our vision and strategy as well. And of course, pay will be a factor in that. We will need to look at pay issues. And I think really in terms of recruiting people in, we need to be very clear that we are recruiting people in for the roles that we have in order to deliver our strategy. So I see, you know, we're not making a step change, but there is a shift around the way that we're working in order to deliver our strategy. So we'll be looking for people who can really align to that sort of delivery. And so we know we've got the right team. I think, you know, we want to make it a good place to work, obviously. I don't see there is any major issues at the moment around, you know, how we're operating. So I think at the moment we have seen some recent changes which I outlined in my presentation. I think most of those are, you know, in some ways positive, in that people moving on and finding careers, that level of turnover is good. So I think we just keep a watching brief around where we are in terms of staff and the skills we need. There is a question about, I hear a lot of work being carried out within the county. As someone living in Leicester, I'd be interested to know if the Trust has plans to be more active within the city and working with the City Council. And absolutely yes. Our next door to nature is our first, which is all about empowering and working with communities, and particularly working around diversity, hard to reach communities. That's focused at the moment around Leicester. I think there are real opportunities. Lots of funding streams, quite rightly, have an underlying principle that diversity and allowing access to a diverse group and expanding that is a core element of receiving any funding. And we're in a great position to try to find new ways of working, to find new communities who we can work with. So absolutely, we will have to, and I think in all these cases, we need to expand our working with some care to make sure it's sustainable. What we can't do is just chase for money. We need to ensure that any work we're going to do aligns to our strategy, delivers what we want, and we can underpin it on the long term in terms of funding. So we need to be cautious around, you know, going into new initiatives, but certainly engaging across urban areas and with new communities is absolutely where we should be working. And then finally, a question around local groups. I haven't had the opportunity yet to meet with local groups. I am doing some talks to them early next year, which would be great. I've worked with local groups in all the organisations that I've been in the past, and find them hugely infusing, valuable, great sources, and it's exactly aligned to our ambitions to try to empower people to be able to take action in their local places and giving them the tools and the support that they need to be able to do that. So personally, I'm a great supporter of local groups. But on a personal level, I need to meet more of you and get to know you. And my offer of coming and talking and meeting with you is very open to any groups out there. So just get in contact. But yes, I'm very supportive around those. As I was talking, if you're happy, Anne, one more I've got up. How will the Trust support biodiversity net gain on planning applications? I believe there's responsibility for planning authorities to resource. You're right. Well, it's a little unclear yet, as it's included in the legislation, biodiversity net gain, but the guidance from DEFRA hasn't been finalised and come out. But what it will put an obligation on some developers of certain sizes to ensure that at the end of the development, the biodiversity is better than it was at the beginning. And that doesn't have to be on a site. So if you build all your houses on one site, you may look for another site to compensate for the loss of biodiversity. And there will be various metrics which are being developed by DEFRA around how that can work. One of the key obligations at the moment in the legislation is that those sites will need to be managed for 30 years. So you can't just create a nature site and that would be the end of it. You have a long-term contribution. I think the Wildlife Trusts, and I've spoken to many other wildlife trusts around this is a real opportunity for us, because we are ideally positioned both to recommend how we can enhance biodiversity of sites and also to undertake long-term management if there are resources there to be able to do that. And I think the planning authorities and the developers will be looking for bodies who can pick up that sort of work and deliver it in the longer term. If you speak to some other wildlife trusts, they are no longer, for example, acquiring high quality nature sites. They consider those are protected already, and why are we buying more unless there is an imminent danger to them? What they're buying is poorer quality sites, which they can use the opportunity of biodiversity net gain to enhance and improve. And I think that is a real opportunity. And we're looking at a developer now looking at a major site will have to look around and think, if I'm going to have an impact on nature here, where can I compensate elsewhere? And I think that gives us the opportunity not only to step in and do some of that work, but to enable that wider influencing and improvement of sort of nature across the county. So I think that the details are still a bit sketchy. We need more guidance, but to me, it feels like a real opportunity that we need to be all over as a wildlife trust and really understanding. And we need somebody in our team who's absolutely focused around that, because I think it could be a bit of a game changer. I think those are the main ones I picked up. And if there's anything else in there.
There's just one that's just come in, which was asking, please could you expand on the data acquisition, data management issues that you reported were under consideration? I think for that, I would actually just simply say it's what I was talking about earlier on. We've got a lot of data that we gather throughout the year. I think as we go forward to deliver the strategy, we've got to make sure that that data is actually targeted. It's the information that we absolutely need. And it's in the areas that we need it, and so it's not sort of it's not such that it's under consideration. It's just simply that we need to be sharpening up the way that we use our data so that we can deliver our strategy as best we can. And I think that's actually simply all I can say on that at the moment. So I hope that's okay for the questioner. In which case, I think I would like to close. I'm sorry, it's now, guys, it's now 9:20, and frankly numbers are dropping off a little bit. So if there are any more, if anybody wants to scribble up a few more questions in the next few minutes, then please do, and we will answer them on the website. But I think I'm going to close this now for answering questions during the meeting, because it is getting quite late. And I say once again, apologies for the glitches earlier this evening that have sort of attenuated the meeting a bit. But anyway, we've got through business now. So I'm actually now going to go towards the closure of the meeting. We're approaching the end of the AGM and its formal business. And what I want to do now is to do what's become a bit of tradition at our AGMs, which is to show a video produced by our staff members, which gives you a picture of their own personal highlights during the year. So over to you, Joe, for that.
Hi, I'm delighted to have joined the Wildlife Trust this year. It's still a challenging time for nature, and we continue to see declines in our wildlife. We've developed a clear and ambitious strategy. We have broad and committed support, and we have a determination to deliver. I want to thank all our supporters, and I look forward to meeting you. Thank you.
Hello, Joe Davis, Reserve Manager here at Rutland Water. Well, it's certainly been an amazing year. So many highlights, obviously the Rutland Sea Dragon, the ichthyosaur, hitting the world news and capturing the imagination of millions of people.
I realised that it wasn't a series of rocks or a pipe or something like that. I actually contacted the council and asked to speak to somebody because I thought that we might have found a dinosaur.
But I just think that coming to Rutland Water and coming to enjoy the variety of wildlife, the variety of habitats, not only wetlands, which obviously we're renowned for, but these incredible woodlands, scrubby areas, ponds, just absolute diversity of wildlife. It's a pleasure to work here. It's been an amazing time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Claire Instott, Senior Conservation Officer for Wider Countryside. In March 2021, our fabulous monitoring volunteers reached the 5-year milestone of collecting records in the English Harwood Forest. To that date, they collected over 27,000 butterfly records and over 14,000 bird records.
Hi everyone from the Linden team. It's been a really amazing year here with over 24,000 visitors through the centre. We've had 8,500 visitors over the winter months. It's also been an amazing year for the Osprey project, celebrating 25 years, and the 200th chick. Amazing, amazing.
Hi, I'm Sophia, Reserves Officer. My highlight is getting a permanent position with the Wildlife Trust and working with this lovely bunch, come rain or shine.
Hi, I'm Hannah and I'm a Green Mentor, and over the past year I've worked with almost 80 young people in developing a variety of environmental projects and connecting them with nature whilst also building their confidence and skills. One of my highlights for the year is working with a group of young people at Rushmead Academy called the Wildlife Warriors, who developed a series of COP26 related workshops and delivered those to visiting students at the Leicester 2021 Eco School Roadshow.
Hi, I'm Ellen Ball and I work in support at development. The highlight of my year was in July when we had a celebration event for the Volunteer Training Centre being open for 7 years. Fantastic opportunity to meet our corporate partners, funders and our neighbouring volunteers.
Hi, I'm Andy from the Station Officer, and the highlight of my year was getting a new role within the Wildlife Trust and gained experience with site management. And on one of those sites, I found the first laboratory.
Hi folks, I'm Sarah Bedford. I was the Assistant Reserve Officer at Rutland Water for the 21-22 year. Particular highlights of that year for me were ringing osprey chicks at Nanton Bay, passing my pesticides course, and helping to dismantle badger hide so it could be moved to a new place on site.
Hi, my name's Luke. I'm the Assistant Species and Recording Officer here at Rutland Water Nature Reserve. I'm here by one of our artificial San Martin banks, and one of the highlights for me last year was that we had our most successful breeding season, and we ringed 1,648 chicks. In the breeding season, with the help of volunteers and staff, we come and monitor these banks once a week and record all the nest contents, number of eggs, number of chicks, to monitor the breeding biology of this bird.
Hi, my name is Josephine Taylor. I'm the Membership Officer at Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. The highlight of my year was to see the membership numbers increase to over 18,000, and also to hear stories of people enjoying themselves on our reserves after all the lockdowns that we've had.
Hello, I'm Helen Fairhead and I am the Volunteer and Events Coordinator for Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust. It's a real pleasure to obviously express my highlights of this year to all of you at our AGM. And although it's difficult to condense that down into one separate occasion, it's very much about meeting our volunteers and finding out all the great work that you do and how long you've been with us, the work that you do, the things that you're planning to do, and really what you get out of working with us as much as anything. And that's been a real highlight to meet as many volunteers as possible, and hoping to continue to meet many more as we go forward. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Praveen Nair, Accounts and Reporting Officer here at Trust since 2020, and I'm very proud to be part of our reliability family. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tim Sexton, the Species and Recording Officer here at Rutland Water Nature Reserve. The highlight over the last year for me has definitely been the sheer variety of work that we're involved in with staff and volunteers from the Species and Monitoring team. We've had some really good counts through the Wetland Bird Survey, just over 125,000 birds counted through that survey. And we've become the #1 site in the UK for gadwall.
Thank you very much, Joe, for showing that video. Oh, hang on, Joe, Right, sorry, we have got a bit of reverb in the office here. Yeah, I was struck at the end there with just that lovely montage of wildlife and thinking, yeah, that's what we're all here for. That's what we were trying to protect. And also struck actually by the frankly appalling weather that our staff and volunteers sort of gaily don their waterproofs for and go out and expose themselves to the elements. So thank you all for that. And so before we close, I want to express my thanks to all members of Trust Council who work so conscientiously on behalf of Trust and its mission, to our hardworking and dedicated staff, and to our fantastic volunteer teams. And in particular, I want to thank you, the membership, not simply for coming along this evening, but for your constant support throughout the year. As Honorary Treasurer for 20 years, I said this, and as Chair, I will continue to say it. We could not do the work we do for the wildlife of Leicestershire and Rutland without you. In common with most charities, the Trust has had to weather a number of storms over the past years, in particular those occasioned by the global pandemic and the economic circumstances that have arisen from it. We're so grateful for your continued involvement in the life of the Trust as we battle against biodiversity loss and we fight for nature's recovery. Thank you so much. And I now formally close the 66th Annual General Meeting of the Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust, and thank you for attending.